Welcome to the Panic Room.
This is Fantasy Football Almost Daily with your hosts, Paul Charchian, Christian Peterson, Matt Harrison, and Brian Johnson.
It's Wednesday. Welcome to the Panic Room at Fantasy Football Almost Daily. I'm Paul Charchi and Matt Harrison, the reigning king, Matt Harrison.
Yeah,
how's it
right.
feel?
It's good. It's been been a couple of weeks of some kingly duties, and I think I've done well with it. I botched a election for the United States, but beyond that, we're pretty good.
Okay.
So you're king of the whole world.
Yeah. King of the world.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, you got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, you do.
I got some things to pick up after this at the store. But
frankly, America's the least of your problems. Yep. Actually, you might want to spend some time in Syria. You might want to go there.
Working on that. That's the target run for Syria.
Second under Syria is figuring out 5 fantasy football players who our owners may be in a panic about. We'll tell you who the 5 are as we play along in our game. The idea is Matt and Christian will make a case for the appropriate level of panic on 5 guys, and whether or not the panic level should be none, some, or acute on each of the 5 players. We begin with Rob Gronkowski. So for Gronkowski, he's got an injury right now, although it's not believed to be long-term. Martellus Bennett's actually scored more touchdowns than he has this year. What is the appropriate level of concern for fantasy owners with Rob Gronkowski? Now, as reigning champion, you get to go first, Matt.
Yes, and I'm going to pick some in this case. You know what happens when an injury occurs? I consult online doctors.
Oh,
here we go.
So
that's the best thing to do.
According to some online doctors,
NickRiviera.com.
Yeah, exactly. A punctured lung can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 or 3 months.
Now, some people are saying he doesn't have a punctured lung.
And Adam Schefter came out on Monday and said the Patriots are now saying that it's just a chest injury and not a punctured lung.
Yes.
I looked back to see any like actual football players who'd had a punctured lung in the last couple of years. Brandon Marshall did the very end of his Chicago Bears run in 2014. He missed about a month due to the injury. It was the tail end of the season. They were out of it. They just kind of wrote him off for the rest of the season. He was done. So
they traded him.
Yeah, then they traded him. So from an injury standpoint, he could miss just this week. He could miss the rest of the fantasy season, which makes things a little murky. But as far as his skill set is concerned, he's awesome. He's really played in 4 games this year. He had 2 games where he was a complete decoy, and he had the last game against Seattle where he was in the game but kind of taken out of it after the injury.
Yep.
So in these other 4 games, he's got 3 touchdowns, and he's top 93 yards every time. So from a skill set standpoint, I have no concern. But the problem is if this lingers, maybe he's a decoy again like he was in the first 2 games, or he's like he was in the Seattle game. So I do have some concern that maybe he's not the Gronk that we want in our fantasy lineups the rest of the year.
But is he the Gronk we need?
Is he the Gronk we need? Let's ask Christian Peterson.
Did you give your answer, by the way?
Yeah, I said
he
some.
he did say some.
Look, none.
Look.
You obviously have not figured out how to play this game because Gronk
he is the rating
Gronk is Charch's guy. You don't say that there's any level of concern with Gronk here if you want to get this answer right.
But I'm about making the best argument.
It is not necessarily about being right.
Online doctor, online
Captain
schmucker.
Protractor.
Yeah. So we don't even know that it's a punctured
Professor
lung.
Protractor, by the way.
We don't know that it's a punctured lung. We know that he apparently can't fly right now. That's not good. So he probably misses this week, which is a huge bummer because it's the 49ers, and he was probably going to have 200 yards and 4 touchdowns against the 49ers. But it's not a punctured lung. We have no reason to believe that it is, or that it's anything that's very significantly serious. And you talked about how good he's been in the games that he was healthy this year. He had scored in 3 straight before the Seattle game. He had reached at least 93 yards in 4 straight prior to that game. he's the only guy that they use to throw the ball to. Edelman has a bunch of targets, but he averages like 6 yards per
he's got one touchdown on
per
the year.
catch. He doesn't score touchdowns. Yeah. And Bennett gets involved, but only when Gronk is out. Bennett's best games have been when Gronk was limited or out. So he's going to miss a game here, but he's going to be back to full health, and he's going to be back to doing what Gronk does in the fantasy playoffs.
You don't sound like you consulted any online doctors at all.
I didn't. No.
Our first of 5 stars, but you're trying to get to 3. Of course, goes to the challenger, Christian Peterson.
This is terrible.
You can't besmirch the name of Gronk and think you're going to get away with it in this room.
I'm just worried that he's not that healthy.
Well, if it turns out you're right, then we'll be wrong. We will be wrong. But I think Christian's right that most likely scenario is he's playing 2 weeks from now, and he's right back to being Gronk, who's been great in every game that he's played in. Basically after the only reason Bennett went berserk last week is it all came after he took that massive shot from Earl Thomas, which was one of the biggest hits I can remember, by the way.
That's true.
That was huge.
And they tweeted each other about it. Did you see that?
Yeah, lovingly.
Yeah, lovingly.
Lovingly tweeted.
Hell of a hit, bud. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
High five. Woo. Our next player up, while we're talking about tight ends, Jordan Reed just has scored touchdowns in just 2 games all season long, and now Vernon Davis materially eating into his numbers, and then you have the, of course, ongoing threat of the concussions. What is the appropriate level of panic for Jordan Reed? None, some, or acute? It is our challenger's turn. Christian, to go first.
I'm going to go with none.
None.
On Jordan Reed as well. He had 1 down game last week against the Vikings, had just 4 targets and 2 catches. Before that, though, in his first game back from the concussion, 13 targets, 9 catches, 99 yards, and a touchdown. Yeah, Vernon Davis is a little bit involved here. He scored a couple touchdowns over the last 4 games, but keep in mind Jordan Reed missed 2 of those games. And also, so Deshaun Jackson missed the game last week. He's got this shoulder injury that sounds like it's no guarantee to get healthy or to stay healthy. Shoulder injuries can be a little iffy. Those can reoccur, especially with an injury-prone guy like Deshaun Jackson. So without Jackson catching passes on the outside, Jordan Reed is unquestionably their most explosive receiver in the passing game. So I think he's going to be just fine. The schedule over the last portion of the season is pretty neutral. They do have a couple. Arizona and Philly are very good tight end defenses, but I went back to last year. Jordan Reed had 9 catches for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns last time he faced Philly. So I'm not particularly concerned about the schedule, not really concerned at all. So I'm not concerned about if Vernon Davis is our primary concern here. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Matt.
I'm bummed because Christian took just about all of my salient points right there. And so I have no concern here. But the one thing I'll add, if you're going to have some level of concern on Jordan Reed, you have to have some level of concern on the entire tight end position, because there's about 2 other guys that can give you the upside Jordan Reed has. There's about 2 other tight ends that can hit 100 yards and maybe score 2 touchdowns in a game. And that means you're deathly afraid of Gronk right now, and you're totally afraid of Greg Olsen right now, and there's no other guys for you to go after. So I think if you're afraid of Reed at all, you're afraid of the entire position.
I don't know how that relates to Reed, really, but I understand it was difficult to go second.
I had to talk.
Yeah, that is tricky.
That is tricky.
It was my turn to say the words into the microphone.
Second star for the challenger as we move on to our third contestant up in the panic room, and that is Lamar Miller. We've seen him get a lot of work early in the season, then he kind of got dinged up, and now his workload's gone way, way down. He's basically now in almost like a 50-50 timeshare with the other backs on the team. That's a concern for many people as well. And, of course, hardly scoring touchdowns at all this year in a really, really backwards offense. The appropriate level of concern for Lamar Miller. We begin with the reigning champion, Matt Harrison.
Doesn't feel like I'm going to keep this crown for very long.
You need to run the table now, but it's been done. It's been done in this room before.
Let's do it.
I think Brian ran the table on me one time.
I think he did.
For maybe his lone victory.
I think that might have been.
And I think he got a pity point.
He did. He got a pity
3.
point.
He really did.
Yeah, it's still under protest.
So as the king, I'm not looking for any pity points. I'm looking to win these points. And Brock Osweiler is so dang bad that it's hurting Lamar Miller, and he's so bad that they're just stacking the box against him and daring teams, or the teams are daring him to go to DeAndre Hopkins, who is great. And Brock Osweiler totaled 99 yards last game, and it's terrible. So what we say on Fantasy Football Weekly is what's bad for the offense is bad for the offense, and Brock Osweiler is frankly bad for the offense. So I have some level of concern, and here's why it's not full-on acute panic right now. The schedule is pretty good. He gets Oakland and San Diego in the next 2 weeks. Both are favorable against running backs. Green Bay after that. The Packers have allowed over 300 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns to running backs in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, their run defense has regressed.
It's fallen on tough times. Then after that, Indy, Jacksonville, and Cincy in the fantasy playoffs. None of those are more than a mediocre matchup for him. 2 of the 3 are actually very favorable. So like Lamar's schedule, like that he's getting a good touch load still. I have some level of concern because Brock Osweiler sucks, but that's it.
Okay.
I also have some level of concern on Miller, and really it relates to the fact that he's kind of, it's turned into a little bit of a timeshare here. He had just 38% of the snaps in week 10. He's had less than 50% of the snaps in 3 straight, and it's partially because he's been dinged up a little bit. He had the shoulder injury, ankle injury last week. He was kind of out of the game for a little bit and then came back in. But Alfred Blue, they're giving the ball to Alfred Blue, 7 carries last week. Something called Akeem Hunt got 8 carries and actually looked pretty good. He had 52 yards last week. But in a weird way, maybe this is good. Maybe Charch was right about Lamar Miller, that he is the reason they've stopped giving him the carries is because he has the shoulder and he has the ankle, and they maybe realized we can't give this guy 25 carries a game. We can't do it. We have to only give him 15.
Tell me more.
But the interesting thing is, that's when he was really good. Yeah. Last year, when he was only getting 15 carries per game, that's when he was so effective. So, yeah, you're a little concerned that he's not getting the 25-plus touches, but maybe in a weird way, this is a good thing. Maybe Charch is right. Maybe Lamar Miller is what Charch thinks he is, which is sort of a part-time change of pace player, but that's good for his fantasy value.
All of that is true. Nevertheless, many salient points from the challenger, their champion, the reigning champion, start of the champion. We've got a close
and
game.
He wants to keep this
interesting
podcast.
No, that was not a pity point. Let me be very clear. That was not a pity point.
All right. I'll take it.
The pandering was too obvious.
Wow.
You need to pander at a level that makes me think I was right without telling me I was right. Our 4th contestant in the panic room, Jeremy Maclin. He's missed time with a groin injury, but that's just, that was no excuse for the first half of the season when he wasn't scoring touchdowns. Alex Smith seemingly cannot throw downfield. He's last year, he was a pretty reliable scorer, especially second half of the season. He scored, roughly in every other game the second half of last year, and you felt like, he was a low downside guy. As it turns out, there's plenty of downside. There has been plenty of downside with Jeremy Maclin. Appropriate level of panic. Some, none, or acute, guys?
Acute. I think this one's pretty easy. In addition to the fact that he's just not been very good, now he has a groin injury. He missed last week, and we're not sure what his status is this week. But he had less than 50 yards in 4 of the 5 games prior to the injury. He hasn't caught more than 6 balls all year. Worse, in 2 games this year, they've actually tried to target him a lot.
Yeah.
In week 2, he had 15 targets and caught just 6 of them. In week 8, he had 10 targets and caught just 3 of them. So even when they decide that he's going to be the guy that they're going to throw to, instead of spreading it all over the field, which Alex Smith seems to be doing, he's giving it to tight ends, he's giving it to Tyreek Hill, he's dumping it off to running backs, he's targeting
Wilson, Conley.
Yeah, there's been games where he's targeted 8, 9, 10 different receivers. So Maclin just isn't the sort of the center point that he was last year. So the injury on top of the ineffectiveness, acute level of panic, I would just drop him outright.
Okay.
Yeah, I would drop him too. Acute level of panic for me as well. And again, CP took a lot of my talking points. The one thing I'll say is his target load has been wildly inconsistent. He mentioned that in his 2 heavy target, double-digit target games, he did next to nothing. But in the last month, 3, 5, 10, and 1 targets for Maclin. So that's just brutally awful. And according to some online doctors, groin injuries can be a little bit tricky for wide receivers. So To CP's points, all the right points, and you should be dropping Maclin.
Also notable, he has Denver twice on the upcoming schedule, incling Week 16, your fantasy championship game.
That's not
so if
fun.
you were somehow to make it all the way through to Week 16,
you can't start him
despite having
somehow,
Maclin
right?
involved, you're not going to start him then.
It's a perfect sabotage drop for exactly that reason. Somebody's going to pick him up maybe in the playoff run, go, I got Maclin for the stretch run. Well, maybe you do, but it's not the case.
You won't want him in
matter.
the championship.
Yeah.
Point to the challenger.
Here you go, sir.
Changing of the guard.
It doesn't have to happen mid-show.
Yeah,
I mean,
it does.
you can,
That's true.
I'll
Maybe we'll have a coronation ceremony
really
before the
should.
next show.
Okay.
Our fifth and final player in the panic room is Matt Ryan. Not that I think anybody thinks Matt Ryan is bad, but he does have some suspicious one-touchdown games, and some of them happening against easy opponents. He, of course, is always tethered to his one really good receiver and what he can get out of Julio Jones. And if Julio Jones has a bad game or gets covered, well, he never has a bad game, it seems like. But if he has a down game, it affects Matt Ryan directly. Your level of concern for Matt Ryan? Some, none, or acute?
I have some level of concern for Matt Ryan.
All right.
It is worth noting, and I went to Football Outsiders DVOA rankings. I think it's a pretty good barometer of how a defense is. Mm-hmm. So they have DVOA pass rankings for defenses. Two of the games that you referenced that were poor games in the last 6 weeks, one was against Philadelphia, the number 1 DVOA pass defense in the league. The other was against Denver, the number 2 DVOA pass defense in the league. So let's stick with that and see what he's got in the upcoming schedule. He's got a bye this week, so you're not starting him. Week 12, he gets Arizona, the number 3 DVOA defense. Week 13, he gets Kansas City, the number 8 DVOA pass defense. Then you get to your fantasy playoffs. He gets the Rams in week 14, number 12. San Francisco in week 15, number 17. Bad defense, but they're terrible against the run.
Yeah.
Not as much against the pass because it's so easy to run on them. Then he gets Carolina in week 16, who he lit up earlier in the year. They're number 19 DVOA. So the good news is it gets easier as the schedule lets on. So if you have Matt Ryan and you're sitting pretty and in the fantasy playoffs, you should be feeling pretty good because he's got a good stretch run. But if you need him to make the playoffs over the next 3 weeks, you might want to
move him.
You might want to move him and check out some take a chance on me kind of quarterbacks who have a better matchup because it's going to be tough sledding for the next 3 weeks. This week, obviously, because he's going to get a 0, but the next 2 weeks after that too.
All right, challenger and soon to be king.
No level of concern.
None
here. Yeah, he's a little bit inconsistent, but that's sort of what he's been throughout his career. He's in the middle of a career season right now. That's good. That's schedule.
Inconsistent.
What's that?
His career season is inconsistent.
By definition, because it is a career season.
Exactly.
So, I mean, players just aren't going to throw 4 touchdown passes every single game. It just doesn't happen that often, right? You got to give them leeway to have a few subpar games here and there. But if your argument is that you're worried about San Francisco and Carolina in weeks 15 and 16, he had 500 yards and 4 touchdowns last time he faced Carolina.
I was worried about that.
San Francisco, honestly, might be the worst defense in the history of the NFL.
I said you're okay once you get to the playoffs.
There's no single player that has a better playoff matchup than Matt Ryan.
For the one game.
You should not be looking to trade him away right now. You're probably in a really good spot because you've had Matt Ryan all year and you spent almost nothing to get him. So you're probably in playoff contention. Pick somebody else up if you're really that concerned about Arizona, Kansas City, and the Rams.
I said.
But don't trade him away. You need him. You need him to win your league in week 15 and 16.
I'd trade him for Drew Brees.
No level of concern. Yeah, I'm sure the Drew Brees owner would be all over that.
It's just about the same ranking right now.
I was expecting, because his only analysis was schedule. I figured you would come with something more than just schedule, but all you did was do schedule as well.
Well, yeah, but his analysis was wrong.
No, you just repeated my analysis.
What is
I
this?
just said it was wrong.
Is this the presidential race? He can just say whatever he wants and it doesn't matter as long as he says it like it is?
I think that's what you just did.
Point to Matt. 3-2. It's still a victory for Christian Peterson, who will take over the helm and the throne. The crown and the scepter.
We need a throne.
Speaking of inconsistency, the judging criteria in the panic room.
It moves.
It's tough to know. It's tough to know what to expect from week to week.
I'll tell you this much. You might want to
pander to Church in one question, you get a point. Pander him in the next one.
And because you did, you don't get anything.
Pandered too hard.
That's right. There's a
never
pandering.
never double pander in the panic room.
No, it's nuanced pandering. That's nuanced pandering.
Oh man,
I encourage you to check that out. All right, do we know what's coming tomorrow? Probably not.
No,
we don't know what's coming tomorrow.
But
we know
Friday.
Friday's the big DFS podcast, so that'll be Friday as well. We encourage you to check that out at Coolerheads29, at Explosive Output on Twitter, and I am at Paul Charchian. What else? Anything? Is that it?
Yeah, I think that pretty much does it.
Podcast. We
need more of that.
To see, good ratings.
And if you found this podcast and somehow don't know about our big weekend Saturday podcast, Fantasy Football Weekly,
how is that possible?
I don't know how that would be possible, but I think that's there are probably some people
they're
not
under
from
different
Minnesota.
names. Yeah,
Fantasy Football Weekly. You want to be sure to check that out as well. It's our podcast through KFAN.com, available on iTunes and the iHeartRadio app. We've got our own channel, so you'll want to check that out too. All right, that's it. Bye.